Right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for dropping by. There are two worries you have with an event like this. The first is that you're going to forget what you're going to say, and the second is that no one's going to turn up. So you've come through for me, so I'll make sure I don't forget what I'm going to tell you. So thank you very much. I want to share with you our journey as a school of moving from Google Apps within a year. It's quite a fast pace. I've put this up here. There's a link here for my presentation, but what I've been told as well is if you scan your badges at the end, Google will send you all the presentations that you've had access to and seen today. So if you just remember to do that, saves you scribbling the address down. But please feel free to contact me on Twitter at any time about questions, because one of the most important things I want you to remember about the implementation of Google Apps is you're not alone, and you really shouldn't be thinking about fighting this for the first time. There are lots of experience that you can gain from and learn from other people's journeys. And here's something for you to think about from a PR point of view when you're thinking about why move to Google Apps, and think about sharing this with your parents and staff and students, but instead of my school badge, think of your school badge there and say to them, what have we got in common with these institutions? Because all of these use Google Apps. So it's quite sensible for a school to think about the technology that they're developing with their students and teaching their students and what they're going to go on to in the wider world, because a lot of these companies now are using Google Apps as their infrastructure. So it's quite good kudos for my school to see my badge at the top and make people and parents and staff think about, just look at the company we're keeping with our infrastructure that we want to use in school. But whilst I tell you about our journey so far, let me give you a kind of snapshot of what we had before. We used to have a learning platform that really existed as a second website. You know, staff would load information, upload information to the website documents, students would download it, work at home, and then either upload it again or print it off and hand it on in bits of paper. And it's one of the few times in my teaching career where I've had to resort to the tech handbook on how to upload information to this learning platform we had before. It wasn't very intuitive at all. We also had a really incredibly clunky email system. I'm not going to name names, but just safe to say that last year, our email system actually went down for 4 days, and the idea that an email system can go down for 4 days at this century just seems mind-boggling. We also had, as a personal dislike, my email address was huge. It seemed to go on forever. It was this kind of user@hbs.hearts.sva. It was immense. And we'd become an academy in the last year, and I said, well, why don't we just get rid of that either? An email address should be able to just trip off the tongue and something you can write down quite quickly. So there was something else I was quite keen to get rid of. And it bothered me because what I wanted was this. You know, it's very difficult to say that you want to put a great experience before your students if what you deliver in school doesn't always match that. And what I wanted was to show that it mattered. I wanted us to put forward the best technology for our students, to show that we wanted them to constantly seek to do better, and we reflected that in ourselves. We weren't happy with technology and platforms that didn't deliver, because that reflected poorly on ourselves. But there's always that kind of dichotomy about how do you get that but manage the cost as well. And one of the biggest challenges I think you face as a leadership team, you don't tend to have many of those on a school leadership team. And the challenges people face sometimes as a technophile is going up to a senior leadership team and saying, look, we really need to use this technology. This is what it can do. It's only going to cost this much. When the leaders themselves are often unsure about what that technology involves. It involves those leaders being brave enough to say, look, I don't understand, and I don't know what you're telling me, and it's very difficult for me to then lead on that initiative when it means admitting their own insecurities. So I think that one of the biggest battles we've got when we're trying to instigate and lead change in schools is how do we teach the people above us that it's the right thing to do and have confidence in our decisions. So I'll give you an idea about our journey. It's been like this for lots of times. It's still like this on certain days. And you know, I don't really want to put you off, because the overall message is, if I was to do this again, I would 110%. But I would do things differently, and that's the point of today. So what I really hope is that if one or two of you feel that you can go away from this a bit more encouraged, a bit more with more resolve, and you do things slightly differently, then that would be absolutely wonderful. Now, I'm going to name drop slightly, And that's that I'd had my eye on RealSmart for a couple of years, and I wanted a front end to Google Apps. I wanted students to have something that they accessed that pulled the Google Apps together. And I'd wanted to introduce this in my last school, and I wasn't able to convince them. So I did the sensible thing, and I kept my powder dry and got a new job somewhere else where I had to convince fewer people, and I just got it implemented anyway, which is kind of the sneaky way of going about it. And they've done a lot of the dirty work for us. I mean, they manage all our user registrations, which I know is a real headache when you think about. We've got 1,000 students in our school, best part of 150 staff, and you have to manage those user registrations. 160 students every year. You need to maintain and update those records as well. So they do a lot of that for us. But also they've got their tools that help support learning in the classroom as well. And I was really keen to use that as our front end, as it were, of our Google Apps rollout. And they supported us a lot with the training. So let me just give you an idea of timescales. I met with the leadership team in April last year. I ordered it in May. We registered our new domain in May. It takes literally 2 minutes. And it cost us, I think, the princely sum of about £5 or £6 with the host provider we use for our existing school website. And we couldn't decide whether it was hitchinboys.co.uk or hitchinboys.com. And in the end, we went for .co.uk just because I liked it more. But it was a much simpler end of the address. And then we had 2 days training in June. The 2 days training was half a day on a tech support, half a day with the SLT at the same time. You don't want any more than that. And half a day in Google Apps and a full day on the RealSmart technology. And that was with 13 staff that I'd picked, cajoled, encouraged, and I got one member of staff from every faculty. So I had my kind of new lead champions in each department, and they were going to be real key personnel in the rollout of this technology over the next year. And I set myself a goal of saying that by July, the end of the academic year, every single member of staff would be using their Gmail instead of their old email system. And it was quite an ambitious target, hence the kind of thunderstorm picture I had before. But we got there. And then in September, we had the mass rollout of student registrations, sold it to parents, told them what we were doing and why, led a number of assemblies, showing to the students why I wanted to use this, how they should and how they shouldn't be using this new technology. And then we really started to kick in with some staff training, because at the moment, we'd only had 13 staff who'd had that kind of time spent on them, getting them used to the system. And there was already quite a lot of uncertainty and nervousness amongst the rest of the staff, and they wanted some support. And the sort of training that we put in place was quite simple to start with. We have a Twilight CPD program where staff have to choose 2 workshops from 4. And I made sure that 50% of those choices was always based on RealSmart and Google Apps, as well as a teaching and learning focus. And they were led by the RealSmart Google champions who had the training in June. And it started off really simply on just literally making a document, sharing a document. You'd be staggered. The one thing that caused the most confusion with this was the actual terminology of sharing a document. A lot of staff just couldn't get their head around that. They still some of them talk about uploading and downloading. And this idea that you share one document, and there's one document with lots of contributions, has been quite a step forward for a number of people. The idea of having up to 50 people on one document at one time is wonderful, but the first time you do it with a class, just step back, because they need a bit of time to explore it. It's a wonderful thing to see, but you need to show staff how to scaffold that, because it's wonderful when you see these 30-odd different bits of colours, but it can be quite a rabbit in the headlight experience. But gradually, we've got probably about 30% of my staff have really kicked on, and they're starting to use some of the more advanced tools and some of the Google scripts. So a number of staff are using Flubaroo, which will automatically mark assessment works that they use on Google Forms. I can't begin to say what a massive time saver this is, although to give you an idea of how easy it is to use, my head teacher uses Flubaroo for his assessments with his one class, because that's pretty much what head teachers teach. And he's got a German class in year 11. And he set this assessment up for just 10, 15 questions using a Google form. He shared it with the class. Everything was fine up to that point. He got the responses, and then he called me into his office and said, there's a problem with this. It's great, but there is a problem. And I said, well, what's the problem? I thought he had a problem with setting his form up. So I looked at his form, went, no, that seems fine. And he said, no, look. And I looked at the top of the screen, and it's Google and its wonderful supportive self said, it appears this page is in German. Would you like us to translate it for you? Which kind of got rid of the whole thing. It was supposed to be an assessment about translating German to English, but I've managed to find out how you solve that, so he's happy. Some staff are using G-class folders, which is a brilliant way of imposing a folder structure in certain students' drive areas. I mean, I teach IT, GCSE. I don't have any notes. It's all in their folder structure. So when I mark their work, I don't take bits of paper home. I just access it from home, access it from my office. It's impossible to lose. I even had a student strop at me last week because we were doing document production as part of the IGCSE, and I was making them do it in Word. And he'd got so used to using this, he didn't do that classic save his document as soon as he'd set it up, lost his work, and then blamed me because if I'd let him do it in Google, that wouldn't have happened. He wouldn't have lost his work, which is true. One thing that's really grabbed people's attention is the audio application. A lot of my staff are concerned about marking essays, and it takes a huge amount of time. But I've shown them, one of our geography teachers has used this tool where he can use audio, his voice, to mark an essay. Save it as a comment embedded in the document. So he can literally sit there with his laptop and say, yeah, your first paragraph's pretty fine, that second sentence is rubbish, you need to change that, and then share it with the student. And he can get through a whole set of essays quickly, but with really decent, effective feedback. And quite a lot of staff have grabbed hold of that and want some training how to use that. Here's an overview of the training we've had so far since September. And these take place after school. And there's a mixture. I mean, the Google Forms is quite a moderate level. They need to be able to work quite well with Drive already. And then I had a catch-up session in November because it was clear I'd left some people behind, and they were feeling quite fed up with the situation where they didn't get this idea of what Drive was and what sharing things were. We had a teach meet in December, and staff presented on some of their uses. And here's a good tip as well. I bought 5 Android tablets and said to some staff, I've got a tablet, would you like to have a go and use it with your class? And they said, yeah, great. I said, yeah, but you're going to have to present and share your findings with the rest of the school, so you can use some sneaky tweaks to get them more involved in these. And next week, actually the week after next, one of my staff has shown how to use Google Sites as a means of setting up some portfolio work so they can demonstrate with their family at home what they're working on in school. So we're really starting to kind of explore the possibilities we're still within our year time frame from where we set it up last year. Now, I haven't really embellished the problems. I'm going to come to that stage, but let me just give you a summary of where we're up to so far. January, every member of staff, student and governor has got their own email address, their own Gmail, their own Google Drive storage, and we're now using that across the school, and we've turned the old email system off. We've got departments putting their teaching resources online, so they're shared. So obviously, it's a lot easier for staff to work outside of school. As of 2 weeks ago, I had 93% of year 7 to 11 accessing Gmail frequently. And when I mean that frequently, I mean at least twice a week, which I think is quite a staggering uptake considering we only really set up with students in September. What's really impressed me, though, is that over the year we've been reflecting on our teaching and learning in the classroom. But Google and the move to Google Apps seems to have really exploded that. And I think if I sit back and think, if I hadn't have done this with Google, would our discussions about teaching and learning practice in the classroom be as progressed as they are and so in depth? I don't think they would be. So I think these two things have coalesced at the right time, which has really triggered this reflection in staff. Because obviously technology won't have a massive impact in the classroom unless you get the teaching and learning right in the first place. I mean, Hattie's shown that really clearly. But there definitely has triggered this conversation now in our staff about, well, if they're sharing what they're using with technology, they're starting to talk more about what they're doing with their teaching practice as well. And that's really, really invigorating. We're seeing that change in culture. We've got parent surveys and student options. I'm the timetabler. And for the second year running, I'll be doing the options returns on Google Forms, so I won't need to chase any bits of paper whatsoever. So it sounds all wonderful. I haven't quite found 10,000 ways, but I think I'm getting quite close. So I want to share some of those with you as things that you might want to avoid in the future. And it's just as well that my keyboard doesn't have one of these buttons, because I probably would have pressed it a number of times. There's been quite a few times over the past year when I've just had this panic and thought, what the hell have I done? I've taken everyone's email away and replaced it with an email system. I'm getting them to think about the way they share documents and share resources with students. And as a timetabler, I'm used to upsetting people and causing panic in them. It's caused quite a lot of anxiety in me as a leader. So I want to reassure you that you definitely will feel that you need that, but you will definitely get through it. So just have that resolve. You will have dark moments, but you will come through it, and hopefully I'll give you a sense of what it looks like on the other side. I'm definitely having to resort to pressing that a lot less frequently at the moment. One thing I've realised, I've developed a much deeper sympathy for those staff who work on tech support. And if you've not seen this video clip where the monks are trying to deal with this new technology of the book, it's hilarious, but it really does show the extent that our tech support are needed to cope with even some of the most basic tasks. And I've developed a real high degree of sympathy for them. So if anything, I've made a few more friends in certain areas of the school that I probably didn't have before. It's amazing some of the things you get asked to support with, but I'm always mindful that to them it'll be the biggest thing that's stopping them using it. So keeping that smile on your face when you go and show them how to turn it on or share it, and realise that they've got to make it accessible within the domain, is time well spent if they stay a fan of the system. I really didn't get this at the time. And this is, I mean, Seth Godin is great, but he said the problem is this: no spreadsheet, no bibliography, no list of resources is sufficient proof to someone who chooses not to believe. You will not win the argument about using new technology with staff if you hammer them with facts and statistics, or just by sheer bloody mindedness, which was my tactic. Because at the very core of what you're doing is you're challenging their security of their skills, and it will upset them. And I really didn't get that at the time. And I tried to wow them with statistics. I tried to show them how many hours they were going to save. And I didn't get the point at the time that they were genuinely just scared. And if I'd have gone in at that level to start with and been really clear and reassured them and said that we're all learning and it will be difficult for all of us, but really dealt with that on a more empathic level than I did, I wouldn't have had to battle as hard as I've done. So of all of these things I'm going to share with you, this is probably one of the most important ones. Don't gloss over the reluctance and see it as just them being bloody minded. A lot of the time they're just genuinely scared by what you're suggesting. So we've really got to connect on that emotional level. I think, if truth be told, the implementation of Google Apps and RealSmart has been difficult for staff. And I think that's my fault. I think I haven't set that clearly enough for them, because there's been quite a few times staff have said to me, well, which one do I use for this? And if I can do that on Google, why am I using that one for this? And I've been thinking, should it have been better to have done Google first and the other one second? But actually, it doesn't really matter. What mattered is I didn't get my vision across clearly in the first place. And if I'd have said to them, this is how you can use these technology, this is how you can use this, that would have been a bit clearer. So that confusion I could have avoided by thinking ahead of what they would perceive as just, well, which one am I supposed to be using? I'm quite happy to use it, but tell me which one I'm supposed to be using. So what I'd suggest is, think about your vision. Think about where will you be next year, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time. And you are not alone. There are schools. I mean, I was speaking to somebody when I was doing my Google certified training a couple of months ago who are 3 years down the line. And they're looking at the implementation of Google Plus in school and using that as almost replacing email. And that's quite exciting. There's always a school that's further down the line. So look at what they're doing. Plan it out clearly and then sell it to everybody who's involved as, this is what we're doing now. This is what we'll do then, and this is what we'll do then. So they're clear about what's expected of them, and they see how it fits together. And I really didn't get that right the first time. So the next time, I'll definitely make sure that's something I'm a lot clearer about. This is my wife's orchestra. It's not a plug. But the reason I put this up here is that when I led this, I focused purely on the staff. And it's a bit like just focusing on the violins, because they need a bit more practice. Sorry if there's any violinists. I didn't worry about the students because I knew they'd get it. And I didn't worry about the parents because I thought, well, if I can't get the staff on board, then I really don't need to worry about the other two. And the problem is, it's a bit like working with one section in the orchestra. it takes longer, and you're creating resentment in other sections because they're sat there twiddling their thumbs. They know there's something exciting. They know you're doing something, but they can't get involved yet because you're not working with them. And I think what I should have done was, when I launched it, it should have been a massive launch. It should have been to parents, to staff, to students, to the local community. We're doing this, and this is why. And I know why I didn't. It's because I was scared of falling flat on my face. But actually, the confidence I've got from doing this means that should I do it again, and I would, I'd go for a huge launch. And just be confident that if I had a good team and persisted, it wouldn't fall flat on the face. It would work. But the awareness that I would create from having that big sell and really ensuring everyone understood why we were doing and taking a lead role in this would have been a much better sell. So I've got to think about how I can still rescue that even though we're a year into it. So that would be a really key bit of advice. Time. Time is always an issue. So the only thing I can say about this, it will be the one reason that staff will say they can't do it, so take it out of the equation. Think of how you can give them time to play around and explore it. Because if time is going to be a barrier, make sure it's not an issue. By setting it up when I didn't have the bulk of the summer term to let staff have that gain time to explore it. I'm not sure there's a perfect time to implement it within your school calendar, but I think you've got to think they're going to need a substantial chunk of time to be able to play around. I gave up loads of my lunch times as a drop-in for staff to show how to get onto Gmail. And the only thing I got back was, well, yeah, that's all right, but it's our lunchtime as well. If you want us to use it, give us time to use it. And I thought that was quite a fair point. So think about giving them time in advance so you know it's not going to be a barrier for them getting involved. We've got a couple of pinch points. And what I mean by this is it's get your infrastructure right. We've got problems with 1 or 2 access points at the moment where we've got staff wanting to use it with a class. 30 students are on with the laptops. The laptops take 10 minutes to 15 minutes to load up. And then when they're all trying to use it at the same time, the access point can't cope with it. And in theory, I'd have changed the access points before. I'd have gone with a load of Chromebooks before, because then you don't have these limits. But let's be honest, schools aren't infinite pots of money. And I needed to create a pinch point to be able to go back to the business manager and say, look, we're using this new technology. It's having an impact in the classroom, of which all our financial decisions should be based around. You need to give me some money now to resolve this. If I get it changed quickly, it'll be the one thing I've got really right, because I've created a crisis and I'll get the money to change what I need to change. If it drags on, there's a real chance that staff will get disenchanted by it. The students will think, well, what's the point? The laptops don't work, and I'll get drift away. So I'm in that window now where I need to drastically look at our infrastructure and look at some new devices. But it ultimately always comes down to money. So a pinch point might be something you want to create, as long as you know you can do something about it within that time window. Swimming pool, job roles. I tend to get involved in things that don't involve me, and I upset quite a few people. I thought I was being helpful by setting up somebody's email address. And what I didn't know is that actually by implementing this change, you're redefining people's job roles, which not everyone's happy about. And if you start taking things away from them, even if you think you're doing them a favour, they're going to suspect you're engineering a change out. And is that not going to be their job anymore? And it didn't occur to me at the time. So next time I will say, this is my role. I promise I won't get involved in these other areas. This is yours, this is yours. Because then everyone's a lot more happy about what's expected of them, and they'll progress with their role quite easily. And I must know, mental note, not to get involved in and think I'm being helpful, because it causes far more problems. Always keep your mind about what the next step is, and this is part of your vision. So obviously we're nearly a year in. I already know what our next step's going to be, and I know what our next step's going to be after that. And you need to, because it's going to cost money at some level. And you need as well, from a leadership point of view, you want to give the staff the impression you've thought of every possibility. So you're not doing this now because everyone's talking about Google. You're doing this now because it's the right thing to do in the classroom. The next thing you're doing is right because it's a logical step from what you've done before. And if staff see that you've thought it through and it's part of that ongoing progression, you won't have to deal with that new battle of, oh God, you're changing to something else. We've only just got used to this. They can see it as a journey. So already have in mind what your next curve's going to be and your next curve. And you're not on your own. And that's the one big thing I really want to say. I had a really good chance when I was doing the Google training to speak to other schools who are further down the line, and that saved me a whole heap of grief. Make a point today of speaking to other school leaders and other teachers and find out, well, what have you done, what didn't work, and then try and find a way around it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, and it's not kind of hopping on somebody else's ideas. If it saves you the grief that we've had to put up with, you'd be mad not to look at what other people have done. So please don't think that you're on your own, you've got to forge your own path. It really isn't like that at all. And just to finish off, just to focus on these, vision, job roles, I mean, these are the points that I really think, if you can get these right, there still will be things that go wrong, but at least you've not missed some of the more obvious ones. Thank you very much for listening.